My name is Antonio Schultz. I never thought betrayal would come from the one person I trusted the most, until I saw the message that changed everything. It wasn't supposed to be this way. My mother, Delilah Fox, was the strongest woman I knew. She was my protector, my rock. The one person who stood by me when my real father walked out of our lives. I saw the way she suffered, the night she cried herself to sleep. She swore she would never let history repeat itself, and for the longest time, I believed her. But then, one night, everything I thought I knew about her shattered. It started with a simple moment. One I would have forgotten if not for what followed. She had handed me her phone, like she always did, to show me something funny. A video. Something casual. But as I watched, a text notification appeared at the top of the screen. Just for a second. A name I didn't recognize. And one word that made my stomach turn. I love you, babe. My chest tightened. My mind screamed at me to ignore it. To pretend I hadn't seen anything, but once you notice something like that, you can't unsee it. That was the moment everything I knew about my mother started to fall apart. Before we begin, I want to warn you. This story contains mature themes. It deals with betrayal, family trauma, and the kind of pain that lingers for years. If these topics make you uncomfortable, you might want to stop watching now, but if you stay, I promise you this, what you're about to hear is the raw, unfiltered truth. A story that still haunts me. A story I never thought I'd have to tell. Before we begin, I need to warn you, this story contains mature themes, including infidelity, emotional trauma, and family betrayal. It explores the painful realities of broken trust and the lasting impact of deception. If these topics make you uncomfortable, you might want to stop watching now, but if you stay, I promise you this, what you're about to hear is the raw, unfiltered truth. A story that still haunts me. A story I never thought I'd have to tell. If someone had told me a year ago that I'd be sitting here, questioning everything I thought I knew about my mother, I would have laughed in their face. She wasn't just my mom. She was my constant. The one person I trusted more than anyone else, and now, I can't even look at her the same way because the truth changes people. It changes the way you see them. The way you remember them. It digs into every memory you have and stains it, leaving you wondering if anything was ever real to begin with. I used to think betrayal was something that happened in other people's families. Other people's lives. I was wrong. I grew up with just my mom, Delilah Fox. It was always the two of us against the world. At least, that's what she used to say. When my father left, he didn't just walk away from his marriage, he walked away from me too. I was 7, old enough to remember the arguments, but too young to fully understand what was happening. I just remember the night my mom found out. She had his phone in her hands, her face frozen in this blank, hollow expression that scared me more than if she had been crying. The screen's glow lit up the room, and though I couldn't read the words then, I knew they had broken something inside her. That night, she held me so tightly I could barely breathe, whispering, "I will never let this happen to us again." I believed her. I had no reason not to. For years, she was my role model, the person I measured everyone else against. She worked late shifts, skipped meals to make sure I had enough, did everything in her power to give me the life she never had. She told me over and over, cheating is the worst kind of betrayal, Antonio. Once someone crosses that line, they will always cross it again. Her words stayed with me. They shaped the way I saw relationships, love, trust. So when I found out what she was hiding, it shattered something inside me. I thought my mom and I would always be a team. But things started changing when Bear Cooper came into our lives. I don't even remember the first time I met him. He wasn't the kind of man who made a strong first impression. He was just there one day. Sitting at our kitchen table, drinking my mother's coffee like he belonged there. Tall, broad shoulders, the kind of guy who carried himself like he was always waiting for a fight. I was 13 when he officially moved in. That was the day my mother's home stopped feeling like ours. Bear was never physically abusive. He didn't have to be. He had this way of talking, this way of making my mom second-guess herself. Every conversation felt like a test she didn't know she was taking. "You really think that's a good idea?" Do you even hear yourself right now? You're always so damn sensitive, Delilah. It was subtle, slow. A drip of poison over time. She changed. At first, in little ways. She stopped laughing as much. Started apologizing for things that never used to need apologies. Then, she started walking on eggshells around him. I saw it. I hated it. But I never said a word. Not because I was afraid of Bear. Because I was afraid of what it would do to my mom if she had to admit she had chosen another man who didn't deserve her. Maybe that was my first mistake. Maybe I should have told her how I felt. Maybe I should have fought harder to keep her from slipping away. But I didn't. And by the time I realized I should have, it was already too late. I made a decision early on, I wouldn't let Bear be anything more than my mom's mistake. He wasn't my stepdad, not really. I kept my head down, focused on getting through high school, counting the days until I could leave for college. That was my escape plan. One more year. Just one more year, and I'd be gone. I told myself that none of this would matter soon. That my mother's choices were hers to make. That as long as I could survive a few more months in that house, I wouldn't have to care anymore. But what I didn't realize was that the worst part of this story wouldn't come from Bear. It would come from her. Because the person I trusted most had a secret. A secret that would make me question everything. And the worst part? The signs were always there. I just wasn't looking for them. Maybe I didn't want to see them. Maybe some part of me already knew, and ignored it anyway. They say the truth has a way of revealing itself, no matter how hard someone tries to bury it. But sometimes, it doesn't hit you all at once. Sometimes, it creeps in, slow, subtle, like a shadow in the corner of your eye. You feel it before you see it. A shift in the air. A tension that wasn't there before. I didn't wake up one day and suddenly know my mother was cheating. I felt it. Long before I had proof. It started with something small. A moment that, under different circumstances, I would have forgotten. My mom had handed me her phone, like she always did, to show me something. A video. Something funny. I wasn't paying much attention at first, just watching, lost in the noise of it. And then, a text popped up at the top of the screen. Just for a second. A name I didn't recognize. Briella Espinoza. And then, a single word that made my stomach tighten. Slave. I remember blinking, confused. It didn't make sense. My family is black. Why would someone be texting my mom something like that? I barely had time to process it before the notification disappeared. I could have let it go. Could have brushed it off as a joke, an inside reference I didn't understand. But something inside me whispered, this is wrong. I glanced at my mother, searching her face for any sign that she had seen what I saw. But she just smiled at me, completely unaware. Like nothing had happened. I wanted to ask her about it. The words were right there, hanging on the edge of my tongue. Who's Briella? But I swallowed them down. Because what was I supposed to say? That I had seen something I wasn't supposed to? That I was reading too much into a text message? So, I said nothing. And I told myself that maybe it was nothing. That was my first mistake. Because it wasn't nothing. It was the beginning of everything. That message didn't leave my mind. It stayed with me, lingering in the back of my thoughts. And when you start looking for something, you start seeing it everywhere. A few days after that moment, my mother handed me her phone again. This time, for something else entirely. And this time, I looked. I don't know what I was expecting to find. Maybe I wanted to prove myself wrong. Maybe I wanted to find something innocent, something that would make me feel stupid for ever doubting her. But that's not what I found. I found texts. Dozens of them. Flirty. Intimate. I love you, babe. I can't wait to see you again. The kind of messages you don't send to a friend. The kind of messages a married woman should never be sending to someone who isn't her husband. My heart slammed against my ribs. My fingers tightened around the phone. I felt sick. I should have put the phone down. Should have stopped reading. But I didn't. I kept scrolling, my stomach twisting tighter with every message. This wasn't a one-time thing. This was something ongoing. Something real. And the worst part? I had no idea how long it had been happening. Once you see something like that, you start seeing everything. And suddenly, the things I had brushed off before weren't so easy to ignore. My mother had started hiding her phone screen when she texted. She used to be open about her messages, never cared if someone saw. But now? She would angle her phone away from me, turn the brightness down. She had stopped using her car's text-to-speech feature. Normally, when she got messages while driving, the car would read them out loud. But with Briella? Silence. And then there was the look on her face. That stupid, soft smile she'd get when she thought no one was watching. The kind of smile I hadn't seen in years. She was happy. But not because of us. Because of her. Because of Briella. I told myself I didn't care. I told myself it wasn't my problem. But that was a lie. Because I did care. I cared too much. Bear had cheated before. I knew that. My mother knew that. I had watched her suffer through it, had seen the way it destroyed her. So why? Why would she do the same thing? Did she think it was different? Did she think it was okay because Bear had done it first? Or was she just selfish? I didn't know what to do. Do I say something? Do I confront her? Or do I let it go, pretend I never saw anything? Because the truth was, I never liked Bear. My real father didn't like him either. Bear had emotionally abused all of us, his biological children included. He wasn't a good man. So did that mean my mother wasn't wrong for what she was doing? Did that mean she deserved a way out? Or did it just mean that she had become the very thing she once hated? I didn't have an answer. I still don't. All I knew was that, no matter what I did next, there was no going back. Because now, I had a secret too. A secret that was already eating me alive. Some things in life change you forever. There's no warning. No moment to prepare yourself. 1 second, you're the person you've always been. The next, you're someone else. I didn't know it yet. But that night? That was the night I would never be the same. The house was still. Bear was asleep. My mother was asleep. And I should have been asleep too. But I wasn't. I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying every moment from the past few weeks. Every little thing I had tried to ignore. The hidden phone screen. The silenced texts. The soft, secretive smiles. The messages I had already seen. I had been carrying the weight of that secret alone, and it was suffocating me. Because I knew something wasn't right. And I knew I wasn't ready for the truth. But the truth didn't care if I was ready. Because it was right there, waiting for me. Then, a buzz. Soft, barely audible, but in the dead silence of the night, it felt like a gunshot. I froze. My mother's phone was on the nightstand beside her. The screen lit up, casting a dim glow across her face. She didn't stir. She was deep in sleep. And the phone? Unlocked. I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly dry. This was it. This was my chance. A part of me screamed, "Don't do it. Walk away. Leave it alone. Pretend. Pretend like you always have." But another part of me, the part that had been waiting, the part that had been watching. That part told me the truth was already there. All I had to do was look. I don't even remember moving. 1 second, I was in my bed. The next, I was standing beside her nightstand, staring down at the glowing screen. Her breathing was deep, steady. She wouldn't wake up. I told myself that. I told myself that as I reached down. As my fingers brushed against the phone. As I picked it up and turned the screen toward me. And then, everything changed. Messages. Not just one. Hundreds. Explicit. Personal. Intimate. They had been talking for months. Maybe longer. There were plans to meet up. Details of where and when. Jokes that implied this wasn't the first time. And then, the words that shattered something inside me. I love you. I clenched my jaw so hard my teeth ached. Because those words weren't meant for Bear. They weren't meant for me. They were meant for Briella. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a one-time thing. This was a life she had built behind our backs. She had let someone else into her heart. Into her body. And she had looked me in the eye every day, smiling like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Because I wasn't looking at my mother's phone anymore. I was looking at proof that she was no better than the man who had ruined our family. I had spent my whole life believing she was different. That she was better than my father. That she was better than Bear. But she wasn't. She was just like them. And maybe, she was worse. Because she had taught me to hate cheaters. She had raised me on the idea that trust, once broken, could never be repaired. She had spent years carrying the weight of what my father did to her. And now, she was doing the exact same thing. I looked at her. For the first time in my life, I really looked at her. And I felt nothing. No warmth. No safety. Just disgust. Because she was a stranger to me now. I could hear my heartbeat pounding in my ears. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips, my throat, my temples. Everything inside me was screaming. I wanted to wake her up. I wanted to shake her, demand answers, make her feel the same shock that was ripping through me. But I didn't. Because at that moment, I realized something even worse. She wasn't just betraying Bear. She was betraying me. And that was something I would never forgive. Days passed. But the anger didn't. I carried it with me, every second of every day. It sat in my chest like a ticking bomb, counting down, waiting for the moment I couldn't hold it back anymore. I tried to act normal. Tried to pretend I hadn't seen what I saw. But I couldn't. Because every time I looked at her, I saw the messages. I saw her lies. I saw the way she laughed with Bear, played the role of a loving wife while she was sneaking around behind his back. She was lying to him. She was lying to me. And the worst part? She didn't even look guilty. Bear and my mother fought all the time. At first, I thought it was just stress. But now, I listened closer. Now, I could hear what I missed before. They weren't fighting about anything that mattered. It wasn't about money or the house or something important. It was stupid things. Small, meaningless things that turned into full-blown screaming matches. Like tonight. I was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the wood grain, listening to them fight about a game. A game. Something about a move my mother made that pissed Bear off. I couldn't even follow the details because it was so ridiculous. And yet, they were at each other's throats like it was the end of the world. Bear was red-faced, shouting. My mother was throwing her hands in the air, frustration all over her face. But I knew the truth. I knew the fight wasn't about the game. It wasn't about any of the fights they'd been having lately. It was about what she was doing behind his back. And suddenly, I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up. My chair scraped loudly against the floor, cutting through their yelling. And before I could stop myself, before I could even think, I said it. Are you really gonna keep pretending you're not doing the same thing? My mother's face went blank. Bear turned to look at me, confusion twisting his features. What the hell are you talking about? He said. But my mother? She just stared. Frozen. Silent. Like she knew. Like she knew exactly what I meant. I looked her dead in the eyes. You think you're better than him? You think you're the victim? You're out here lying, sneaking around like you're not just as bad. Her mouth opened and closed like she was trying to form words, but nothing came out. Because she knew. She knew there was nothing she could say that would make it okay. You went through my phone? Her voice was quiet. But there was anger in it. Not guilt. Not shame. Anger. Like I was the problem. I laughed. A bitter, humorless laugh that didn't sound like me at all. That's what you care about. Not the fact that you're cheating on your husband? Not the fact that you've been lying to me for God knows how long? But the fact that I found out? She shook her head. Antonio, you don't understand. No, I cut her off. I understand perfectly. I understand that you spent my whole life telling me how much you hated cheaters. How much you hated what Dad did to you. And now, look at you. Her eyes filled with tears. It's not what you think. Then tell me what it is. She didn't answer. She couldn't answer. She swallowed hard. Her lips pressed together like she was forcing herself to say the words. Bear has cheated on me more times than I can count. I froze. What? She exhaled shakily, wiping at her face. 5 years ago, I tried to leave. I tried, Antonio. But it wasn't that simple. We had the house, the finances, the kids. And every time I tried to go, he made it harder. I stared at her. Because I didn't know what to do with that information. Bear was a piece of shit. That wasn't news. But it didn't change the fact that she was still lying. That she was still sneaking around. So what? I said. That makes it okay? She let out a shaky breath. I wasn't looking for this. I didn't mean for it to happen. But it did. She looked at me, pleading. You don't know what it's like, Antonio. To feel so alone. To be trapped in a life you don't want, to have someone finally come along and make you feel wanted again, so that justifies it? I snapped. You think that excuses what you're doing? She shook her head quickly. No. I'm not excusing it. But it's not as black and white as you think. I clenched my jaw, fists tightening at my sides. Because that wasn't what she taught me. She had spent years telling me that cheaters were the lowest of the low. That once someone crosses that line, they always cross it again. That betrayal like that can't be undone. And now, she was standing in front of me, begging me to understand. You became the very thing you swore you hated. She sucked in a sharp breath. Antonio, you let him hurt me. And now you're just like him. She broke. The sob ripped out of her, like something inside her had finally shattered. She covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking as she cried. But I didn't feel sorry for her. Because she wasn't the victim in this story. I turned and walked away. Because I couldn't look at her anymore. Because in that moment, I wasn't looking at my mother. I was looking at a stranger. Months passed. And like everything else in life, the truth finally did what it always does, it tore everything apart. My mother and Bear separated. It wasn't some explosive, dramatic breakup. No screaming, no thrown objects, no final, scathing words. It was quiet. Cold. Like two people who had been holding on to something that had already been dead for years. I should have been happy. This was what I wanted, wasn't it? To see Bear gone. To see my mother finally free from him. To walk out of that house, take my bags, and never look back. But as I stood there, staring at the empty walls, at the broken pieces of a life that no longer existed, all I felt was nothing. No relief. No victory. Just emptiness. When I left for college, I told myself I was escaping. That I was running towards something better. That the past was behind me now. But I wasn't running toward anything. I was running away. Away from the house that never felt like home. Away from the mother I no longer recognized. Away from the anger that had taken root inside me and refused to let go. I should have felt free. I should have felt happy. But all I felt was anger. A kind of anger that wasn't loud. That didn't explode or burn out. It was quiet. Heavy. The kind that sits in your bones, in your chest, in your throat. The kind that doesn't leave. I didn't speak to my mother for months. I didn't speak to Bear at all. I cut them both off, like severing a limb. But the resentment? The resentment stayed. I'm 25 now. It's been years since that night. Years since I stood in that house and saw my mother for who she really was. And if you had asked me back then, I would have told you that time would fix everything. That one day, I'd wake up and it wouldn't hurt anymore. That I'd look back and it wouldn't matter. But I'd be lying. Because it still matters. Because I still feel it. Because I don't just hate them. I hate myself. For caring. For wishing things had been different. For holding on to something that was never mine to hold on to in the first place. I fear that I will never heal from this. That this anger, this resentment, this wound, it isn't something that fades. That no matter how much time passes, it will always be there. Waiting. So, tell me. Do we ever heal from betrayal? Or do we just learn to live with it? There are certain things in life that change you forever. Betrayal is one of them. People talk about infidelity like it's just something that happens between two people. A mistake. A lapse in judgment. A moment of weakness. But it's not just that. It doesn't just break relationships. It breaks families. It destroys trust. And sometimes, it destroys a person's ability to love again. I still have it. The picture. It was taken years ago, back when I was still a kid. Back when I still believed my mother was different. We're all there, her, Bear, me. Smiling. Pretending. Looking at it now, it feels like a lie. Like a moment frozen in time that never really existed in the first place. I stare at it for a long time, trying to remember what it felt like to trust her. To love her without question. To feel safe. But I can't. Because that version of me, the kid in that picture, he's gone. I turn the photo over. Face down. And I walk away. Infidelity doesn't just ruin marriages. It ruins childhoods. It leaves scars that time may never heal.